Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. I'm Sharon Moshavi. I am the president of ICFJ, the International Center for Journalists. We support a global network of more than 132,000 journalists around the world, and I hope and assume that many of you are from that network here today. So welcome and thanks for joining us. I've got with me today three amazing winners of our Knight International Journalism Award over the past few years. This award is given to journalists who do extraordinary work that has incredible impact around in their countries, in their regions, and often around the world. So I want to get right to it. Let me introduce the three of them who are here with us today and join me in welcoming them. First, we have Pavla Hochova. She is our 2021 Knight International Award winner. She is an investigative journalist and media founder from the Czech Republic, and her investigation into the brutal murder of her colleague helped unmask the perpetrators of that crime and contributed to the downfall of the Slovak government. Most recently, she has been part of the Pandora Papers, which the Czech Prime Minister had secretly invested millions of euros in luxury French real estate through a series of shell companies. And her stories may have contributed to his election loss just this past week. So welcome, Pavla.
Thank you.
Our second guest today is Joseph Poliszuk from Venezuela. He is our 2018 ICFJ Knight International Journalism Award. Joseph is a three-time finalist for the Latin American Prize for Investigative Journalism. He co-founded Armando.info in 2014, which is the only media outlet dedicated exclusively to investigative journalism in Venezuela. So welcome, Joseph.
Thank you.
His work on the Pandora Papers as well has just been amazing. He exposed millions of dollars in bribes that went to an account associated with a high-ranking official's wife, among other stories that he and his team have worked on. So really, really impressive work. And our third person joining us today is Umar Chima of Pakistan. He was a 2013 ICFJ Knight International Journalism Award winner. He is an investigative reporter for the News International in Pakistan. He has faced numerous threats and challenges, and his quality of journalism has been recognized by numerous honors. He has played a landmark role, not like our other colleagues here, not just in the Pandora Papers, but in the other ones, Panama Papers, the Paradise Papers. And he really did also amazing work and really can speak to sort of how this worked, how this largest collaboration, which ICIJ is calling it, this is the largest, I think, collaboration of journalists to date. And that's something that I want to ask you all about today. And Umar, maybe you can start by talking a little bit about this. What was this like, and how was this markedly different from let's say, the Panama Papers?
Yeah, first of all, it's a matter of privilege to be part of such a historic investigation, and which is setting new precedent. Because I remember when I was part of Panama Papers, so we were saying that this is the biggest leak in journalism history, and the journalists assembled together to untangle it, to unsolve it. That was also, the biggest team. Now in 2021, we have Pandora Papers, and it is bigger than Panama Papers, and so was the collaboration. More than 600 journalists from 150 media houses and from 117 countries. So, overall, it was a kind of, it took us into a dark world of this offshore company and how they are paid and what they are aimed at. Apparently we say that, and we all run the disclaimers that, they are for the legal purpose, but in reality, they are more than that. They are many people have used it for certain notorious reasons. So it was not a learning for our readers. It was a great learning for us that how this financial world operates and how the rich hide their fortune away from the public view.
Thank you. Sorry, Joseph, did you want to add something to that?
Yeah, as you are saying, this is huge. This is the biggest journalistic collaboration and the biggest investigation around the offshore, the tax havens. In Panama Papers, the main office was just one in Panama, but here we have 14. So with this work, we can understand the system of the offshore world and how it works and who is behind it. And one of the big surprises, maybe the biggest, is that there are a lot of prime ministers and top of the leaders of the world behind these offshore companies, handling behind the scenes.
So Joseph, can you tell us a bit about your work that has happened so far with the Pandora Papers? What have been the biggest stories, the biggest findings that you have discovered in your reporting?
Yes, I would say that these kind of projects would be a mirror of the world. I mean, there are some news about tax evasions in Europe, for example. I understand since the Panama Papers that there are some narco traffickers behind the offshore companies in the case of Mexico. But in the case of Venezuela and some of the countries of Latin America, what we have found is corruption. It's not just people, because there is a huge debate around if it's legal or not legal. But in the case, what we have found in the case of Venezuela are illegal schemes of corruption. People that don't have, and mainly officials, public officials, that don't have a way to explain how they have so much money, and this money is hidden in tax havens. And there is a case of a minister that we found. There is a case of the treasurer of the country, and some of them. But more than the finding, what it's really interesting for us is the way that the scheme. I mean, we knew that some of the money that we found was disappeared, but we didn't know the way how it disappeared. And it's really interesting to explain the movie at the end.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you for that, Joseph. Pavla, what about you? What were the biggest findings from your work? And I think my internet is a little off, so I apologize to everybody. What, I hope you can hear that, but Pavla, what were your biggest findings? What was in the work that you did?
In this project in Pandora Papers, we had a big story, and it was a story about Czech Prime Minister buying through really complex offshore scheme or structure, chateau in France and other real estate at Côte d'Azur in France. And you know, the story would not be so shocking, because when he was buying the real estate, he was not in politics yet. But what was more shocking was his reaction when we were trying to approach him and ask him about those investments. And he first ignored us, and then he actually, when my colleague was trying to approach him directly, the bodyguards were pushing her away. And that was the point when we actually understood that we are probably in a much bigger story than just, you know, a rich man buying real estate.
And how did that affect sort of the rest of the work that you did once you realized that?
We, as a whole team, but it is not many people. We focus on this story to make it really good, really strong. We went to all the places that we went to the seats of the companies, including British Virgin Islands, where my colleagues were banned from entering it based on a simple information they are journalists. They were kicked out of the country. We went to Monaco, to the seat of the companies. They told us that the companies don't exist anymore. And we also went to Mougins, what is the tiny town in France, very close to Cannes, where we were just trying to talk to the neighbors who didn't know that Czech Prime Minister owns a real estate. We also did a lot of, we spent hours and hours talking to experts what this kind of offshore structure might mean, if it is optimization of taxes, if it is money laundering, if it is, like normal business transaction. We spent hours and hours just reading through the documents because those were hundreds of pages. And of course, we coordinated with other media such as BBC, Guardian, German TV, Washington Post, and ICIJ.
Thank you for that. Umar, tell us, and what were some of the biggest challenges that were faced there?
Yeah, you know that Pavla's country is where we were in 2016 because we had our prime minister's children in Panama Papers. So that created a lot of hype, and the Panama Papers remained in the news until the prime minister was ousted. Although the entire process was politicized, and his opponents in the powerful circles, they made it sure that he is outed. But that his children's name in Panama paper, that set a kind of benchmark. So whenever there is a news about, for example, about the Pandora Papers, so there was a lot of hype and everybody was wondering. And when I explained that these Pandora Papers are bigger in size and scope than Panama Papers, so it was interpreted that there should be somebody Prime Minister plus, that there this is how it was interpreted. So for audience, this was the biggest challenge because they don't settle on less than the Prime Minister in Pakistan now. So although we had 4 ministers, and then there were 7-8 generals in another first, because we never had a military man before, so it was for the first time. And but just dealing with them, and overall we have been digging all through 1 year just into the record, just trying to find out, and at the same time ensuring that nobody gets a word speaking to someone, and they would ask that, why are you asking? So I would say that just somebody was mentioning, I thought to check it. So just to ensure the confidentiality, that it does not raise alarm all around before the project is out. So that was the biggest challenge. And the second is that just catering to the expectations of the readers, as I mentioned about the Panama Papers, when we compare it with the Pandora Papers.
So what impact are you seeing now, given that challenge, as you said, with readers, if it's anything below Prime Minister? What has been, what ripple effect or impact do you think you're seeing now, or might you see?
After this was for the first time that there were 4 cabinet members in it. So the demand was being raised because our current Prime Minister, he rode on the slogan of accountability to power. So, he said that the Panama paper was a God-sent opportunity for him. So there was a lot of expectations from him that now it's time to start accountability from within his own cabinet. So a couple of things have happened in Pakistani context. That first, the Prime Minister tweeted that he has set up a committee which would investigate all those names who have appeared in the Panama Papers. I don't know what is the status because it has been set up, that I know. Then our Transparency International local chapter, they have filed a petition with the Supreme Court, wondering that what happened with the people who were named in Panama Papers, and what is going to happen with those who have been named in Pandora Papers. So in Pakistani context, things go ahead in a very uncertain way. Sometimes they go at a high speed. Sometimes they show inordinate delay, and they are at a very slow pace. So let's see that how they move forward, unless something happens. And we also have a culture where some individuals are targeted. A kind of selective accountability is done, and others are set free. So let's see how things move forward.
And speaking of impact, Pavla, talk a little bit about what's happened in the Czech Republic since the Pandora Papers have been published.
For us, it was a bit tricky that we published only 5 days before elections, general elections. And, the outcome of elections was that even the predictions were that Andrej Babiš, the then prime minister, and his party would win again. It didn't happen. And they lost very tightly. It was like really a very tiny number of voters who didn't vote for them, but they ended up second. And it was a surprise. It was not our aim to influence the election outcome, but it happened, and people claim that significant number of people claim that it was because of the case of Pandora Papers, and the fact that the prime minister lied on TV that he doesn't have any real estate in France, and in the evening admitted that he actually might have something.
That could be potential impact. I think that's what we call impact. So let me turn the conversation to the process of this largest journalistic collaboration in history, because I think for a lot of our folks tuning in here today, our journalists, people really want to understand how this works and how this worked. Joseph, can you talk a bit about sort of the process of being part of this collaboration and the cross-border collaborations that were part of it as well?
Yes. Remember that this project, the starting point was more than 11 million of documents. So first of all, you have to understand the data, to organize, and to understand the way how each office or bufete used to organize in order to begin the investigation. I mean, this is not just a leak. There are lots of investigation with that starting point. So first of all, you have to understand each name, each company, each tax haven, and then organize a team in each country. But at the end, we were 600 journalists, and this is a challenge. And as I told you yesterday, I would say this is delicious. For example, I reported one of the stories with a colleague in Portugal and another one in Miami. And it's really nice when you finish your work, you go to the bed, and the next day you receive an email of your colleague in the other side of the world talking you that he or she found something that you in the team were finding. So this is another way to do journalism. It's quite new. The Panama Papers was the first ones 5 years ago. And the scheme and the codes of the investigative journalism, I think, are changing in that way. And it's amazing, because if the crime has been sophisticated, I think that we have to organize and to set up another way of investigation.
Umar, what are your thoughts about this collaboration process and how that affected your work?
Yeah, actually, I would say that now we are living in era of collaboration, and as organized crime and corruption reporting project, they would say that it takes a network to fight a network. So the time of lone wolf is over. We have grown up in that time when we used to think that a journalist can make a lot of difference. But now the world we are living in, we are facing enormous challenges, and it's not one body's job. More collaboration means greater impact. That gives a sense of purpose, because sometime journalists, they used to think only about their bylines. Now, when they are in a collaboration, more than byline for them, it is important that they were part of a historic project and they are making a difference. The impact is the ultimate goal for what we do. For example, if I have done journalism for 20 years, so when I look back, for me, the important is to know that what difference I have made. So if that is without a difference, it is pointless what I have been doing. So this collaboration, this culture, it's relatively new in our part of the world, but it's thriving, and it is promising, and it has shown result. And now, when I started journalism, I used to think, I realized that as if evil starts from Pakistan and ends in Pakistan. But now I realize that it starts from Pakistan, that it transfers, it crosses the border going to the other countries. So I have to follow it. And I cannot do it alone. And even that is beyond the capacity of law enforcement. Sometimes they need to have some agreement with other countries for exchanging the information. In absence of that, they don't get it. And I can speed up this process if I know the journalists elsewhere in the countries where the information is going. So I can do it at a quick level, and we can bring information to the public that might, the law enforcement may be able to obtain after a year. So I think, this is the best weapon. This collaboration is the best weapon to fight corruption, because it's a global. And if the networks are global, we'll have to, the collaboration among the journalists, it should also be at the global level.
Pavla, can you walk us through a little bit about your process in working on these stories without giving away any trade secrets, but it would be nice to sort of hear a little bit about how you operated with colleagues in different countries, cities, etc.
I think, that Joseph and Umar, they commented on the collaboration and importance of collaboration a lot. There is a big kudos to ICIJ, International Consortium of Investigative Journalists, that they were able to actually coordinate over 600 journalists, everyone with a strong opinion, everyone kind of a, like superstar in investigative journalism in his country. So this is a great challenge. But let me talk a bit more about some kind of a more details how the work actually looks, because the misconception about the work is that we get some documents and then the story is written there. But no, what we get is access to a database, and we need to really go over hundreds and hundreds of pages that doesn't make any sense. You know, you really need to dive into the papers, dig into it, and then try to find out the context, because what you see is like very boring kind of like this person bought those shares and then transferred the company there, and then a new director was appointed. And it all looks kind of legit, you know, there is no, you know, alert, crime is happening. It's not there. It's those are really just the business documents, and you need to understand what was happening in your country to understand what is the symptom of wrongdoing in the documents. So, and it's very detailed, very precise work that you need to do and that you need to communicate with the rest of the team, because everyone has a kind of different experience. Everyone has a kind of a slightly different opinion on what it can mean. And even if you ask experts like former police investigators and so on, they don't have a perfect clue, because only those people who set up the companies and owned the shares in those companies, they have the whole picture. And of course, they don't want to share it.
And I would add that there is another point that we have always to maintain, and it's the security of all the network. As Pavla have told, in each country you have different situations, and you have to guarantee the trust, the confidence, and the security. So it's a challenge for those who don't manage the technology up to date to be sure and to make sure to send mails with PGP, for example, and messages that don't show to the authorities and to the people what's happening before the investigation.
That's really interesting. And both of what you talked about made me think about skill sets, right? As a journalist, as you're doing this work, you talked about technology, but what skills do you need to have? What did you use? And in your teams, are there different skill sets? Are people expert in different areas? So how does this kind of within a team work as well?
Talking about collaborative journalism, I think that the image or the image of the investigative journalist have changed. I see now the investigative journalism as a team more than a guy. So we don't need to be superheroes. Each one have to have something, and always this is the way. So it's important, as I was telling you, to maintain the skills of the secret, something like this. But at the same time, it's important to understand the documents, and there are others that can go to the street in order to report. So this is a team, and this is huge. And I would say that this is the secret.
Umar, Pavla, any thoughts about that as well, in terms of just the different skill sets and how that within a team that's functioning?
You know, working in such a big project, it's really a humbling experience. And as Joseph has explained, that it's not one man's job. And, you know, this is what we tended to think before. More we are exposed to such working, further we realize that, you know, this collaboration, you know, it's a kind of, you know, different geniuses who have been brought together, and they are doing their best in their own fields. And, you know, and that could not have been possible without them. Regarding the skill set, you know, for example, where the technical skills were required, it was mostly being done by ICIJ. You know, the skill set, for example, what I was doing, what Joseph was doing, what Pavla was doing. So we were adding it to local context, and, you know, nobody would be more interested to know about Pakistani in the data more than me. So the same goes with the other journalists. And nobody would understand that what's going on the ground about those individuals. So going after them, it was important. And so for us, it was more related to the digging. On the technical side, it was being dealt by the ICIJ. And as Pavla mentioned earlier, sometimes it happens that you talk to different people. Many people ask that, so what is new in it? You have got the hold of the data and what you are doing. So it's not, sometimes establishing identity, it becomes a challenge. And even if you do it, then you look for more. As a journalist, we try to make our story bigger and bigger. And, with that promise in mind, we look around and ask the people that, about that person in a subtle way. And at time it happens that there are questions that remains in the mind, which has not been answered yet. But we have the data, we have the information, and we keep checking it with people. And when the story comes out, there are answers into different people's mind. They discuss with us, or we are in a better position to dig it further, to take it to a next step, what we have already explored.
That's great. Let me ask, there's a question here, I wanted to ask it as well, is what the biggest challenges that you faced? And I'll double that by asking both, what was sort of the biggest challenge each of you faced, and what was the most exciting moment? So the highs and the lows, shall we say. Pavla, do you want to start with that?
Yeah, like with this story, with Pandora Papers and the Czech Prime Minister, the biggest challenge was to explain to the public that ICIJ and the Pandora Papers, it's not plot against Andrej Babiš, that I'm not agent of CIA who was hired to coordinate the putsch on the government and coordinated 600 journalists just to overthrow the government. It was almost impossible. Everyone, was totally convinced that we published the story on purpose only 5 days before elections. And even though we try to explain and explain and explain that I don't work for a secret service and I can't influence the decision of 600 journalists on publishing date, it was a big challenge.
And that does sound like an enormous challenge. And was there a bit of excitement somewhere along the way in all of this too?
Only half an hour after we published, there was a debate on a TV, like this super debate of the politicians who are running to be the next prime minister. And only half an hour after we published, they already took the information and asked those questions we were not able to ask the prime minister because he was, trying to ignore us. And finally, we got at least some of the answers.
Joseph, you want to take that question next? The highs and the lows.
It took months, I would say more than a year. And one of the biggest challenges was to understand the schemes of corruptions. This is like matryoshkas, a company inside another company. And I would mention the case of a huge case of corruption in Andorra. Some of the money of the corruption of Venezuela is in Andorra, is still in Andorra. And we have shown this from 10 years ago, but now we understood that how was the process, and some of these companies were set up in British Virgin Islands, in Panama, and it was a big challenge. And there are two moments so cool. Firstly, when you are in touch with colleagues of all the world trying to do the same and to do the best. And the other one is the moment that you publish And this day, in this case, was the Sunday that everybody are in their own countries, in their own media outlet, publishing different projects in the same way. This is powerful.
Delicious, I believe, was a word you used before. Umar, what about you?
Yeah, as Paulo mentioned about having Prime Minister named in the record, and you have to explain that why he's there, and after when we had the Panama Papers, so I was facing the similar kind of questions, and many thought that it's CIA work. And there is a universal at international conspiracy that has been hatched to destabilize the government in Pakistan. But I made it sure, and I tried to explain in the best possible manner that there was no conspiracy involved. The opponents, the critics, they would say that what difference he had made, even had he if he were not part of the papers, they would have ultimately to come out. So on one side, they are blaming you for what you have done, and the other side, they are, just ignoring because they don't like you. And this time the challenge was that how can we bring Prime Minister into it, because expectations of the people, and he was not there obviously, and I told different people, and you see that, how can, I feel empowered being the custodian of this information, but I also have constraints. I cannot put anything in the record. I cannot pull out anything out of record. Even my publisher's name was in the Pandora Papers, and I could not have pulled it out. And and he was also named. And another challenge was sometimes, establishing the identity of persons, because the names and the addresses given, they are at times we get to know that the address was given 10 years ago, and now the residence has been changed, and you want to check without letting them know that what you are doing. And because it was a kind of risk. If there is one case of mistaken identity, the people are up to discredit the entire work. You see that if that identity has been wrongly published, it means that it has jeopardized the credibility. And the excitement, it started, for example, in Pakistan, 24 hours before the publication. The announcement was made, and it was run through our television channel, which is the biggest in Pakistan. So, everybody, me and my colleague who was part of this project, Fahad Durrani, so we were in a kind of two the most important people in Pakistan who would know that whose name is there, and everybody else was guessing it. And even before that, when we sent the questions, there were people who were approaching us directly and indirectly, wanting their names to be removed from the papers. So, this is where I could not help them. Even when they asked my publisher, he would say that I myself am explaining my position. How can I help others? And when the paper was published, there was live transmission for 2.5 hours, and everybody was watching that what's going on, and every word we were uttering, it matters. So there was a sense of accomplishment, but at the same time, it was a big call, and a demand. It was a job requiring a lot of responsibility, and the verification that has to go together.
That's great. Thank you. Let me open it up for questions in a second. So if anyone's got a question, please throw it into the chat or the Q&A. And while we're doing that, I just want to mention that our ICFJ Tribute to Journalists 2021 is going to be happening online on November 9th. Pavla, who is joining us here today, we'll be honoring her. So we're very excited about that. We'll also be honoring Natalia Leal from Brazil, who's done an amazing job countering disinformation coming from the Brazilian government. And we'll also be honoring Ian Applebaum and Bill Whitaker, really just great journalists from here in the US. If you want to learn more and register for the event, the link is in the chat, or go to www.icfj.org. So I've got a few questions here, and please feel free to put more in, but there's a good question here from Ranjan from about safety tips. And I would love to hear from all of you, really, what tips and what advice can you give, both about your physical personal security and digital security in doing this kind of work? Joseph, go ahead.
Yeah, the digital security is very important, and the consortium always asks and requests to maintain the security tips, and also help to go in that way. And also it's important to organize your team and maintain the security inside your team. I would say that, but these kind of measures you have to follow always, not just in that project. Mm-hmm.
Umar.
Yeah, I think while working on such investigations, you should be aware that what you are doing. So it means that you should be rather careful even asking questions. And when I've been part of such investigations, I don't let anybody know that what I'm doing, unless it is required to tell somebody that what's up. And even my family didn't have the idea. They got to know when the news was run our television channel that an investigation is coming out. Then they realized that why I was so busy all through the times, because I realized that everybody has a best friend. So it doesn't mean that they leak some information with some bad motive in their mind. So sometimes they share, and you don't know that who is the recipient, and how will it travel all around. So because it is important to stay away from surveillance, because there are many people around. They are in the watch out. They want to see that what you are doing, and I think this is one thing I can share here, because there are other tips, but and that is a public forum. Sometime sharing it can alert other people who wants to watch us, but better to do not let yourself know unless it is required. So this is the principle when you are a part of such investigation. Don't even if you ask somebody a question, don't give a complete or exact reference why are you asking, or whether you are working on some project and who is heading it. Don't do it. Just talk about a person you want to get information about and you have information about.
Pavla, well, what is your position on this, the security, how you handle both kinds of security? Yes.
I think it's important to mention that ICIJ, as provider of the database, really took care of us regarding the digital security, because even if someone would understand that we are working on such a big case and would come to the, would steal our computer and steal our telephone, still the database is online. So most probably they won't be able to get to any data. You need to log in. There is two-factor authentication. It's under a unique URL. So I think that this was regarding digital security, and also all messages were sent encrypted. I think that was a really high standard that was also protecting us, because of course we made it clear that, you know, we are not working the way that we have like a box full of papers and we are just, you know, reading through it, but that we have this kind of a digital security standards and we follow them. So, you know, stealing our technical equipment wouldn't really help anything or wouldn't stop the story. And regarding physical security or personal security, you just really need to be aware of the fact that more people know what you are working on, then it may put you in a risk. Usually, the moment that you need to tell your editor is the point when you are going to do an interview with the object you're writing about. So they should be aware that it's happening and that there may be, you know, more focus on you, but otherwise really, especially at the initial stages when you are still trying to understand what's going on, you don't share this information.
Great, thank you all for that. We've got a few questions here about collecting data, the challenges of collecting data and verifying all of this information, especially given this large amount of data. So can you talk a little bit about that verification process, that wading through all of this?
Yes, again, this is not just a leak. This is an investigation that the starting point is the databases, So it's a journalistic process where we have to verify and go to the places. It's even a physical work in order to achieve and to verify. And there are some stories, for example, that if we are not sure, we don't publish. So it's very important, the verification process.
Pavla, Umar, any thoughts on that? Going that painstaking work of verifying all of this data?
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, you know, it's we have to be very careful that you know, just establishing identity of one person, because it must be an evidence-based thing. And I remember that in cases we were so careful that unless we were able to speak to the target, we were in a state of disbelief that whether we have got the right person or the wrong person, because and it depends on the kind of data we have. It was not uniform in nature. It varies from person to person. In cases there was only basic information available, sometimes their address and the name. And in cases there was passport available, other information was available. As I was doing it, I found one person who was having a different address from the place he was living. And then I just checked out and I found out that he, some time back, there was a court case going on against him. So I obtained the court record only just to ensure that, to see that what address was mentioned there. And then I was satisfied that he is the same guy, because we cannot you know, approach them. And there was a criteria, SOP from the ICIJ, that there was a time frame that before that we could not approach anybody regarding you know, asking them questions. So it was important, you know, if we want to proceed further to investigate, to dig out further about such individual who we assume is the one we are in the data. So we have to make it doubly sure that they are the same person.
Pavla, anything you want to add on this topic?
Yeah, we, you know, even though we were tempted to publish some of the stories, even in Panama Papers, that we were not able to verify the information, that we just decided that we need to drop it. But otherwise, the database does not only contain the business documents or the legal documents, but it also contains things you can easily verify, as you know, details about the person, like his personal data. I mean, scan of the passport or address where this person should be living. This is kind of a, you even have a picture of this person. So this is kind of a easier way to do at least some very basic verification. Also, the thing is that we are talking about something like 11, almost 12 million documents. And it would be a hell lot of work to forge 12 million documents just to, you know, put the journalist off the track or discredit them.
Great, thank you for that. Let's go back to security for a second. There's a question here about how do you immune yourself, if that's possible, from threats, because a lot of people obviously who are coming up in these stories, they're powerful, they might have criminal backgrounds. You know, the stories are published, your work is not done. I know you'll be doing more as well. So how do you handle that? And I'll ask too from a mental health side too, a stress side, because you know, we know that that is a big factor for a lot of journalists as well. There is, you know, this is not easy work. So how do you, now that, you know, these stories are published and you'll be doing more, how do you deal with, are you getting, I don't want to ask you're getting threats, but how do you deal with even just emotionally with the sense that, you know, you're really going after powerful people? Anyone want to take that?
Okay, let me take this. It's a difficult question because it's very personal, and everyone has a different way how to deal with it. But this is not something new. It is a big case, but it's not something new in regard that we are not. You know, this is the first time someone is threatening us. So we just, you know, probably everyone who is doing investigative journalism found a routine how to stay safe and how to stay sane, and you know, in this term, some kind of a life-work balance. What means in this regard? How could you balance the risk you are taking with a normal life? So do you want to lock yourself on some safe place and never come out again? Or are you willing to take a certain risk of being, you know, attacked on a street and go out and try to live a normal life? I don't have any clue that I can pass to anyone else. Everyone needs to find this kind of a balance himself or herself. But it's important to know what is the level of the risk you want to take doing this job.
That makes sense. Let me add on to that, maybe for Umar and Joseph, and thank you for that, Pavla. What advice would you give to people who want to be doing this kind of work, doing investigative journalism? What are your sort of top tips, I would say?
As our colleague from Slovenia, I was reading her interview at ICFJ website. So I like what she said. She said that doubt everything, and I think it's important. Even doubt yourself. You know what you are doing and what everybody is doing, because without doubt you cannot proceed forward. And doubt is the origin of questions, and this is how we follow things. And this is very, you know, and another point is that you should have in mind that your effort should not go wasted. It must have an impact. And the investigative journalism is the best form of journalism which can promise an impact. So, you know, this is, I would say, that is the superior form. And, you know, you realize it empowers you in a practical sense. You know, no other form of journalism may be empowering as much as this one, because, and this is the accountability journalism that we all want to do. Actually, we do it through different ways, not realizing that, you know, how they are different from each other. But I think that if we want to have an impact, you know, the investigative journalism is the way forward.
Joseph, do you want to have the last word on that?
Yeah, I would say that it's important to work in team, to take advantage of the network, of this powerful network. Yeah, that.
Great. Okay, well, we'll end on the words powerful network. I think that's a nice way to end this conversation. Thank you all so much for this incredibly, really interesting, illuminating, and I think useful conversation for those of us joining today. Thanks everybody for joining as well. Just a few housekeeping things before we go. If you are a journalist or you know someone who is an amazing journalist who you think should be nominated for our Knight International Award, please also go to our website to learn more about that. As I said before, don't forget to register for our ICFJ Tribute to Journalists 2021, which will be happening on November 9th. You can watch it live and you will obviously see Pavla there today and many others. So again, thank you so much for joining and we will see you soon. Take care.
Okay, bye.
Thank you.